Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Mr. Anthony Show. We definitely appreciate you all tuning in once again. Tell me something. Do you all believe in subliminal messages? And if you do you believe that this has been going on since the inception and founding of our country? Definitely since the invention of the radio and television, two of the main sources utilized to push propaganda and subliminal messages. Do you believe that this exists today? One of the most polarizing, influential figures ever, Mr. Muhammad Ali, was being interviewed back in 1971 on the television network BBC. And he, in a jokingly way, touched on subliminal messaging in depth. I mean, the way that he set these words up and the way that he got his point across was phenomenal, to say the least. And we're going to touch in depth on this. Also, we're going to be introducing my new AI counterpart, Mr. Jamal, who's going to narrate this interview. So sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and let's take a ride.
I always wondered when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I ask questions. I travel these countries. I watch how people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? I said, why is Jesus white with blonde hair and blue eyes? Why is the Lord's Supper all white men? Angels are white, Pope and Mary and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally we go to heaven. I said, well, what happened to all the black angels when they took the pictures? I said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. She said, listen, you quit saying that, boy. I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now. Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks and I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. Did they have a lot of bathrooms in heaven? So anyway, I was always curious. I always wondered why,
Muhammad Ali didn't grow up questioning the world to be rebellious. He questioned it because things simply didn't add up. As a child, he sat in the same pews as everyone else, listened to the same sermons, looked up at the same stained glass windows. But what he saw raised bigger questions. Because everything around him, every symbol, every face, every hero, every angel carried the same color, white. And he wondered why. Why did the images of divinity, purity, righteousness, and leadership all look one way? Why did the holiest figure in the church have blonde hair and blue eyes, when the land he supposedly came from never produced features like that? Why were angels painted white? Why was holiness illustrated in white? Why did heaven look like a gated community with a dress code? He was curious. Curious enough to ask the questions most people were trained, subliminally trained, not to ask. Because that's what subliminal messaging really is. Not loud commands, but quiet assumptions. Assumptions repeated so consistently that eventually they stop looking like messages and start looking like truth.
Tarzan is the king of the jungle in Africa. He was white. White man I saw this white man swinging around Africa with a diaper on, hollering, oh! Do you all see Tarzan over here? Do you see Tarzan? Yeah. And all the Africans, he's beating them up and breaking the lion's jaw. And here's Tarzan talking to the animals, and the Africans been there for centuries, and he yet can't talk to the animals. Only Tarzan can talk to the animals. I always wonder why.
Look at the patterns he noticed. Tarzan, a white man, ruling the African jungle, a place black people had lived in for centuries. A man detached from the culture, the land, the people, yet somehow the only one powerful enough to tame lions and speak the language of animals. That's not just entertainment. That's a message.
And then they got some stuff called White House cigars, White Swan soap, King White soap, White Cloud tissue paper, White Rain hair rinse, White Tornado flow wax. Everything was white. And the angel food cake was the white cake, and the devil food cake was the chocolate cake. I said, Mama, why is everything white? I always wondered, and the president lived in the White House. And Mary had a little lamb, his feet as white as snow and Snow White. And everything was white. Santa Claus was white. And everything bad was black. The little ugly duckling was the black duck. And the black cat was the bad luck. And if I threaten you, I'm going to blackmail you. I said, Mama, why don't they call it white mail? They lied too. I was always curious. And then this is when I knew something was wrong.
And what about the products? White Swan soap, White Cloud tissue, White Rain hair products. Everything pure, soft, clean, fresh, white. And everything dangerous, unlucky, corrupted, black. Blackmail, black cat, black sheep, devil's food cake, dark. Those weren't coincidences. Those were centuries of linguistic programming, cultural conditioning, subliminal messaging embedded into everyday life so deeply that people repeat it without ever noticing. He wasn't imagining it. He was recognizing it. Because subliminal messaging isn't always intentional, but it is always influential. It shapes the mind before the mind learns to shape itself. It tells a child what beauty is before the child ever sees a mirror. It tells a community who deserves heaven before they ever learn their own worth. It tells a nation who should lead and who should follow long before anyone votes. He learned that these messages weren't about religion or entertainment. They were about hierarchy, about power, about identity. They taught people to associate whiteness with goodness and blackness with inferiority. Not through lectures, but through stories, pictures, songs, nursery rhymes, and traditions. That's how subliminal messaging works.
That was heavy. Definitely heavy. Shout out, rest in peace to the GOAT, Muhammad Ali, aka Cassius Clay. He hit it home for me, y'all. I mean, he uncovered something that most people spend their whole lives ignoring. The danger is not what they show us. The danger is what they don't show us. That's what he realized. And he also realized that heroes don't look like you. Heroes don't appear to have the same complexion. At least that was his take. You see more of that now in Marvel and, Black Panther and, some of the other superheroes and things that we see now in modern times. Once again, this was in 1971. Things were different in that time. So we've seen some faces that look like I was on the big screen in hero roles. So some of it has changed, but the point of all of this, the messaging, is still there and still subliminal and some just blatant in our face, right? But, you know, he realized those things back then, that angels didn't look like us. You know, the leaders of the time didn't look like us. We didn't see a black president until Barack Obama, right? Well, after this interview was recorded. I mean, beauty didn't look like us as far as the Miss America pageants and things of that nature, even on the male side, you know, not until later in life did this happen. And, you know, thank God that it did, right? Some of these things that we never thought would happen actually happened. But do we wave the victory flag? Nah, because we still got a long way to go. A long way to go. You know, we still got a long way to go. And if you're not careful, and you could start believing that there's no place for you based on the messaging and how they have this whole thing set up, right? You know, but Ali questioned it. Even back then, he questioned it. Imagine if this man was well and living now and never experienced the ailment that he went through, the things that he could have did later in life for people, not just black people, just for people in general, right? I believe he would have transcended anything that he did during his career after he retired from boxing, if he would have been healthy enough to survive longer, you know, and been of a good sound mind and body. Because obviously, you know, he lived a pretty long life even after boxing. But just imagine what would have happened if he wouldn't have fell ill. You know, just imagine that. But the man was ahead of his time. You know, he reclaimed his own image. You know, he reclaimed his own worth. You know, he reclaimed the right to see himself as, you know, beautiful, strong, divine, heroic, you know, and he did it right here in this lifetime, because the truth of the matter is you don't have to die to receive heaven, right? You don't need permission to feel worthy. You know, you don't need validation from a world that has never been built to validate you anyway, right? So he learned that the greatest liberation starts with a very simple question. Why? And once you start asking yourself that question, you know, the messages or the subliminal messages, you know, will lose their power. We have to be zeroed in and focused so that we can see beneath the stories that they try to sell us. Because it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. I definitely, and once again, appreciate you all tuning into another episode of the Mr. Anthony Show. And you already know, before I go, we always gotta show love to the people. Because it ain't about me. It's about y'all. And without y'all, there's no me. Be blessed. Tell someone you love them. And don't fall victim to subliminal messaging. Peace and love.